Wineries recognize that the climate change is a shared risk for the entire industry. So the collaboration on climate action benefits everyone.
What happens when competitors stop competing on sustainability data and start sharing it? That's the question behind International Wineries for Climate Action, a global coalition that now represents roughly 3.5% of world wine production, from boutique estates to some of the largest wine companies on earth. Fran Estartus is the operations manager for IWCA. Before joining IWCA, she spent a decade building the carbon program at VSPT Wine Group in Chile, one of the first wineries to join IWCA's Pioneer Challenge on net zero. In this conversation, we cover what she learned going from one winery to collaborating with wineries globally, common failure points in GHG accounting, how IWCA is standardizing soil carbon sequestration across diverse vineyard soils, and what a repeatable, verification ready GHG inventory actually looks like in practice. I'm Aaron Stainthorpe, and this is the Carbon Management and Accounting Podcast. If you have questions, comments, or a guest suggestion, you can reach me at podcast@northstarcarbon.com. This episode is brought to you by Northstar Carbon and Impact, the carbon and sustainability management platform built by sustainability professionals for sustainability professionals. Northstar helps companies simplify GHG accounting, improve data quality, and stay audit ready across scopes 1, 2, and 3 emissions so teams can spend less time reporting and more time driving real impact. Here's my conversation with Fran Estartus. Fran, for listeners who may not be familiar, can you paint a picture of what IWCA is and how carbon accounting works in the wine industry? What are the challenges that you're trying to solve? And if you can help people understand the impact that IWCA has been able to make for IWCA members and then in the wine industry overall in terms of driving the conversation.
Well, first, thank you, Aaron, for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here today with you. And the International Winery for Climate Action is a global coalition of wineries working together to decarbonize the wine industry. What makes IWCA unique, I think, is that it's not just a pledge or a network for sharing ideas. The IWCA members commit to very concrete requirements, measuring and verifying their GHG emission across the scope 1, 2, and 3, demonstrating real reduction over time, as well as taking renewable energy into account in its operation. Today, IWCA members represent roughly 3.5% of the global wine production, with wineries on every continent. While that may sound small, it's included wineries ranging from boutique producer to some of the largest wineries company in the world. Part of our work at IWCA is helping ensure that despite this difference, everyone measures and reduces its emission consistently, credibly, and comparably so the industry can actually learn from each other.
Wow. Well, I think just as a former board member of IWCA, I do want to applaud you and the whole IWCA team because I think that the mission and the impact that IWCA is driving is incredibly impressive. I did want to ask your background to getting to this role at IWCA, because prior to being at IWCA, I know that you did carbon accounting at VSPT, which is a large wine company, and maybe you can provide the listeners with some background about VSP. But I wanted to ask if you could speak to your journey as you went from really focusing on one company, one winery, and now thinking collectively about IWC and really operating at a global framework. What what has happened for you in that process? And then now that you're working with so many different wineries, where do you see patterns or common hotspots that you actually think there's a lot of synergy and benefit in working collaboratively that people may not see as much when they're just embedded within one company, one organization?
One thing that really surprised me when moving from working at a single but a large winery to seeing dozens through IWCA is how different wineries manage their carbon inventories. Some of these differences are completely reasonable. Wine production varies by region according to the vineyard management, for example, wines styles, and of course the national policies. So naturally, inventories reflect these realities. So we see in some countries that public policies promoting renewable energy, for example, are driving wineries toward decarbonization. But I have also noticed that regardless of the size of the operation and the location, the headaches at the beginning of the process are the same, including more administrative tasks, such as data collection, for example, how has the data, the quality of this information, and whether it's arrived on time. Sometimes it's not clear who is the responsible. So and then if we try to talk about unnecessary complexity, sometimes wineries try to track every tiny detail in their first year, which can lead to frustration and a strong urge to give up the process.
I do think that, yes, many people have felt that frustration as they try to figure out which pieces of data are material, which are not, and how
Yeah.
to go through and do that. I guess I did just want to again think about going from VSPT to IWCA, the GH method, the GH protocol, that is standard guidance. Everybody's following that. But it does feel like the data collection, data processes, the size, the administrative burden, or however else we want to frame it, that while there are commonalities, is going to be unique to each company, each winery. Um, do you have any guidance that you've seen, like, even going back to maybe not chasing every thread, especially right at the onset, but having seen many wineries go through the process, same process, but very different systems,
Yeah,
what recommendations would you have for somebody that's a new winery joining IWCA?
I think that any winery have to be very clear what is its goal. Um, for example, if a winery is starting with the carbon accounting today, my advice will be it's essential, for example, to share the message with everyone involved in ensure it's permitted the organization. And of course, to design the system with future verification in mind. So that's mean documenting assumption, keeping data sources traceable, and structuring the inventory. So it can expand over time, especially for the emissions and scope three. Um,
How do you see carbon accounting and decarbonization going hand in hand? Because for carbon accounting, we want to have a robust inventory and an inventory that actually gives you actionable data. But I typically find carbon accounting, by its very nature, it's always going to be backwards looking. It's data from the last year. Decarbonization, we're doing forward projections and we're probably using the hotspots that we can see in a greenhouse gas inventory to then figure out where to focus our efforts. And IWCA just, it's interesting being able to see the hotspots, but then trying to figure out how to implement action. I wanted to ask if you can share where you've seen people be successful in leading decarbonization efforts and how people engage with decarbonization once they've done their inventory.
Yeah, I think that is crucial. Identify two main sources of emission in your operation, like 80/20, for example. And with this, you could be useful this information when you decide to identify quick wins for reduction. You can see in the IWCA last report that almost wineries has 0% in its emission of the scope 2, for example, because they use renewable energy, and that is a quick win. And but at the same time, we can see the challenge could be maybe in the packaging process or in the scope 3. And what about the wine or the grape when you the winery purchase that's wine or that's grape? And people sometimes could be underestimate this information.
Yeah, I think that is a very interesting observation because I tend to think that in the wine world, our supply chains are oftentimes smaller than you might see in other markets where people might talk about commodities, but many wineries like to actually know their grape supply and have a close relationship with grape growers. But it's also true there's assumptions, and as soon as you start dealing with agricultural commodities that are grown outside of your control, there's a lot in terms of how do you get that data and how do you properly account for the embodied emissions.
Exactly. For example, you can have a boutique winery, and this boutique winery has only its own vineyards, and it's easy to manage because it's yours. And but its absolute emissions could be uh, biggest than a big winery, a large winery, because maybe the large winery has some winery has operation in different countries or in different regions, and this is winery purchase wine and grapes. This is three could be not so easy to manage, but their emissions could be or the in intensity could be lower than a boutique winery.
There Um, I did want to transition from this to talking about a very exciting initiative that I know you've been working closely on with IWCA, which is the Soil Organic Carbon Sequestration Initiative.
Yes.
This feels like a tricky area of carbon accounting. There's been a lot of new guidance coming out related to, the flag for GHG protocol. How do you
Yeah.
measure soil carbon changes over time? I wanted to ask if you can share with us what IWCA is doing here and why standardizing soil carbon sequestration matters for the wine industry.
Yes. Okay. Well, soil organic carbon is one of the most exciting, but also one of the most complex area in agricultural carbon accounting, I think. So now, what WCA is working on is helping wineries measuring soil carbon consistently and scientifically as part of a collaborative effort that we continue today with the Porto Protocol Foundation, as you said, the Regenerative Viticulture Foundation, and the Association of Regenerative Viticulture. That's mean aligning with established soil samples protocol, defining clear baseline, and ensuring measurements can be compared across the same vineyard and over time. The standardization is crucial here, I think. If every winery measures soil carbon differently, tracking is not possible, and it's difficult to build trust in the data. So now IWCA and its partners' goal is not just to help individual wineries measuring soil carbon, it's to help the wine sector build a shared understanding of how soil management contributes to climate mitigation.
Well, I think it's very exciting work. And just as a really zoomed out perspective for maybe listeners that don't know, the hope is that if vineyards can increase their soil carbon sequestration, that's a way to actually bring down emissions. But I also have found, and I share the same feeling that it's exciting but very complicated, just the variations in soil types, in
Exactly.
biology, in sequestration, those all create many, many challenges for measurement. And so being consistent and having a way to compare is important. Thinking about it over different time scales also brings up new challenges. And so it feels like an exciting space, but a space with many variables that is evolving quite quickly.
We are at the beginning trying to figure out if this is a good practice or not, because as you said, the carbon sequestration depends of very different factors. For example, soil types, climate, management practice, and even the sampling depth. And so we need to try to understand what is the real potential of the vineyard soils. What about irrigation has influence over that or not. And now, with the result that we have humble results. We have not so much information. We know that so many wineries are trying to have information about their own projects, but we don't have a lot of information right now. So we are trying to just standardize the information that we have.
Well, I'd really want to applaud that effort. I also was just thinking about this specific project in the larger context of IWCA. And Fran, I'm forgetting if you mentioned this at the beginning, but IWCA, the mission statement is to help decarbonize the wine industry. So I love that lofty approach of really thinking collaboratively. And since IWCA has been launched. I think IWCA has shared a greenhouse gas calculator that wineries can use to measure emissions. They've shared reports on best practices that you can see with regenerative farming. And I think this um, latest effort to really share and consolidate data on soil carbon sequestration, it's really providing a lot of benefit to people that are not just IWCA members, but want to understand this space. And for people that haven't seen, Fran referenced the IWCA annual report, but it's fascinating to see there. It shows the average emissions for an IWCA member, but then it breaks it down by each individual IWCA member and includes kind of important metrics and narrative to give context to how everybody's working collectively towards a shared goal. But the way that they get there is going to vary based off their unique conditions. And so, again, I think this carbon sequestration project is crucial because it's really that power of collaborating and then sharing results publicly that helps
Yeah.
everybody improve their methodology and understand best practices.
Exactly. If every winery has information or want to know more about it, can contact me or the Porto Protocol Foundation or the Regenerative Viticulture Foundation. We just want to have more information and share everything with everybody because the climate change is a problem for everyone and the benefit could be useful for everyone, you know?
Yes, I love that that is part of the IWCA mission, and it's really amazing to see that impact. I think for many people, when they first find out about IWCA, a lot of wineries and probably many companies for that matter, they haven't necessarily even done a carbon inventory yet. With IWCA, you're seeing many different wineries do their inventory. And oftentimes people get tripped up doing their inventory. As you mentioned before, like it's complicated.
Yeah.
What are 2 to 3 carbon accounting challenges you see wineries experiencing in their first few years? And do you have any advice for wineries doing their inventory to try to avoid those most common challenges?
Yeah, well, I told you before, the first challenge that I see is regarding scope 3 agricultural emissions, especially related to grape or wine production. So many wineries underestimate how complex this part, the inventory could be. So for example, see of the winery purchased grapes or wine, I think that the winery should look closely and understand how similar or dissimilar the production of this grape or wine is in comparison with the production of their grape or wine itself. The second common issue that I see is data collection system. Some wineries build carbon inventories without accountability, and this quickly becomes difficult to maintain as the inventory grows. And the third issue is trying to make the system perfect from the day one. So carbon accounting improves over time. What matter most initially is establishing clear boundaries, consistent methodologies in a process that can evolve. No.
That makes a lot of sense, but I wanted to ask, what does good look like? Not perfect, but good, because
Yeah.
I think you've seen a lot of climate leaders. And so when somebody is doing carbon accounting really well, they have a repeatable system, it's something that uses credible data. What are the hallmarks of that system, and what separates those wineries from wineries that do struggle doing carbon accounting?
Yeah, okay. In general, wineries with robust and consistent emissions inventories tend to be those wineries with year of experience and learning in this area, and at the same time are wineries with failures and learning in the process and very honest. They say, okay, I made a mistake. I want to fix it out, you know? So first they treat the inventory on an operational system. It's not just a sustainability report. And that's mean every team of the company contributes data and has a real deep understanding of the process relevance and the need for timeline, high quality data, for example. Um, you can see, for example, that they have clear documentation of methodologies and assumption, which become critical when you move toward verification or external reporting. And third, they focus on consistency over perfection that I said before. Sometimes perfect can be enemy of good. I don't know if you have that sentence in English.
Yes, we have that exact same phrase, "Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good," and I think that really helps here because when something is so daunting for people first getting into carbon accounting, um, I think the idea of chasing every single thread and everything needing to be absolutely correct can be very hard, but I think for many that have been doing this for some time, that understanding of continuous improvement and understanding that assumptions are always gonna be part of the process
Hmm.
helps realize it's more important to kind of focus on continuous improvement and also be willing to do a look back and acknowledge if a calculation should get improved over time because that's how we get real progress. At
Yes,
least that's my personal sense.
yes, and I agree because when I start at VSPT 10 years ago, I really didn't understand what they are ask me what do you want that I do.
Yeah.
I really don't understand how I have to build a GSG inventory. What is the crucial information? What is the people that I have to ask? Okay, and then I can make this inventory, but what happened after? What I have to do?
Well, I think that actually speaks to your last comment about when wineries do it well, that it's really embedded throughout different teams. I think you used the word like operationalize, or it's part of their because it does feel like when different departments within an organization have buy-in, then you really start to get more of this culture change. And
Yeah.
oftentimes I've seen many sustainability teams, they have responsibility but not ownership. So they're asked to collect and maybe asked to lead an initiative, but they don't really have the necessary authority, or sometimes they don't have kind of leadership or the influence that really helps support the follow through. So it does feel like there's this piece of, as you said when you were at VSBT, okay, I'm getting all this information. What do I do with this? Like, how is that organized?
Yes, I think that the collaboration and clear goals are powerful in this process. Everyone at the company must clearly understand the objectives, the goals, and must be aligned with them. You know, so yeah, we have so many companies with a sustainability development team, but they are alone. They have not ownership, and the other teams don't know about the project. So everybody needs to be in the same with the same mindset. I don't know how to say that in the same room.
Yeah, and aligns like this is
Aligning.
what we're yes.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, I love this conversation, but I was hoping to ask for another example, which is sharing of best practices. And I think we talked about all of the work where IWCA has producing reports, kind of showing
Mhm.
member emissions data, producing reports on the soil carbon sequestration, sharing tools and other best practices. Have you seen opportunities where a winery improved their carbon accounting after learning from peers in IWCA? And within the IWCA community, how does that sharing of best practices work? And are there any examples you can give us where the IWCA community, the members, have really helped support each other?
Yeah, well, one of the most valuable aspect of IWCA is members' willingness to share experience very openly. For example, they often share innovative projects that help reduce emissions, including what didn't work. They are open to sharing their successes and the lessons they have learned from their failures. IWCA has wineries worldwide, and they can share information each between them with the peers very easy. So we facilitate this through working group, for example, workshop and technical exchange seminars where members can discuss challenges directly with peers or with external experts. And what's interesting is that despite being competitors on the marketplace, wineries recognize that the climate change is a shared risk for the entire industry. So the collaboration on climate action benefits everyone. And they are very, very generous with their information.
Well, I think building off of that, it feels like we're going from sharing information, and sometimes that's at the individual winery level, but collectively, all the data that IWCA is collecting now over multiple years, and as you said earlier, 3.5% of global wine production,
Uh-huh.
that is actually a very compelling data set that's really giving visibility into carbon accounting and emission reductions. And so I wanted to ask, if you could speak to that benchmarking and where you think that data opens up opportunities for IWCA, for the wine industry, and just kind of at large.
Yeah, well, I think that the benchmarking has huge potential because it helps winery understand where their emissions profile sits relative to the industry, but at the same time could be tricky. Wine production, as we said before, varies significantly depending on climate, irrigation needs, yields, and production styles, and of course the national policies. So the benchmarking needs to be done carefully and usually using normalized indicator such as emission per liter of winery produced. IWCA is exploring how aggregated data could help identify industry-wide trends and opportunities for reduction while still respecting confidentiality and regional difference. The goal is not to rank wineries, absolutely not. It's help everyone improve.
What did you learn at VSPT that you think prepared you for your role at IWCA? And what have you learned at IWCA that you wish you knew when you were building VSPT's carbon program?
I work at VSPT Wine Group for almost 10 years. And VSPT was one of the first wineries to join the IWCA's Pioneer Challenge to become a net zero winery by 2050. And when my boss said to me, "Here, this is yours, empower yourself, make a difference," I was really scared.
I would be too.
So, but along the way, I realized that any company, and especially one that depends on nature, such a winery, must navigate it uncertainties like this challenge, and should not necessarily wait for certainties before acting. Say before, everyone at the company must clearly understand the objectives and be aligned with them. And I insist the collaboration and clear goal are powerful.
And so that's some of what you wish maybe in hindsight you had known at the time at VSBT, or maybe gotten that guidance just to understand kind of how that alignment helps take carbon accounting off of just one person's shoulders and really makes it this collective organizational
Exactly.
goal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a company objective. It's a company task. It's not depend. It's not in the shoulder of just one person. And at the same time, it's yes, I see every day different wineries, different places with different size, but the teams or the commitment of the company is the same. They have a goal very clear. They want to work in this. They believe in this. Antes.
We're always talking about the future, whether it's 2030, 2050. We're looking ahead and we're thinking about how to decarbonize. But while we're thinking about the future, we also have a lot of changes that are happening real time and a lot of uncertainties.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask if you have any advice for a winery that's doing their carbon footprint, how to think about future proofing their inventory and what it's good to incorporate now that really helps avoid problems in the future.
Well, I think that personally, I think that the GSG emission inventories now is a strategic move. I think that the wineries need to try to understand where is the information, the origin of the information that they need, how is the quality that they have right now, and if they don't have the data, they need to start to collect or create to report. As IWCA, for example, we doesn't look for perfect data in the first year, but waited for a clear, robust methodology and a repeatable process. So I think that it's essential that the wineries try to find a responsible person who lead this process and collect all the data. And I think at the same time, they don't need to have very sophisticated tool. You can start with an Excel. Actually, IWCA calculator, and it's for free. You can download on the website. It's just to try to collect information and define who is the responsible.
Well, that's great advice, and thank you for sharing that. I wanted to now move us into our closing segment, which is the implementation minute. If somebody was commuting to work or somebody's listening to this and they're just thinking about all these ideas, when they get to their desk, what's one thing that they could do? Probably take something like 30 minutes that really helps move their inventory management or their climate action in the right direction.
Well, I think that spend time identifying the origin of each major data source. Carbon accounting becomes much easier when the data ownership is clear, and identify the main sources of emission on the operation. 80/20. If winery want to learn more about IWCA or explore a membership, the best place to start is the IWCA website that I said. And yeah, there is a lot of information. It's for free. You can contact us. We are the IWCA team is very able and happy to talk about it.
Well, I will be the first one to admit that I'm biased, but I would highly recommend that wineries look at IWCA because I think their leadership is astounding. And I think just even outside of the wine industry, it's quite an impressive feat to think about an industry led initiative that really holds members to a high standard of doing greenhouse gas accounting,
Yeah.
committing to inventory reductions, having renewable energy and really sharing best practices both in the organization and outside of it. Before we wrap up, I did want to give a thank you to the sponsors of this podcast, North Star Carbon and Impact, for supporting us. If you're looking for an easier, more transparent way to manage carbon and ESG data, prepare for audits, reporting, and decarbonization planning, please visit northstarcarbon.com to learn more or request a demo. Fran, I've learned so much from this conversation. I think our listeners are going to be very excited to hear this. Where can they go to connect with you and follow IWCA's work? Is it the IWCA websites?
Yeah. Well, people can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm Francisca Estartus or Fran Estartus. And of course, follow the work IWCA is doing through the website or LinkedIn or Instagram. The entire IWCA team will be happy to address any question about this.
Fran, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed our conversation. And to all of our listeners, if this episode was valuable, please share your biggest takeaway on LinkedIn and tag us so we can continue the conversation there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.